Breaking news out of Dallas this morning. The Cowboys are acquiring wide receiver George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the latest from our NFL insider Jonathan Jones. The Steelers will reportedly be receiving draft compensation, including a third rounder and some other pick swaps. Pickens is entering the final year of his rookie deal, posting 59 catches for 900 yards and 3 touchdowns this past season. So this is the production making its way over to Big D. This past season averaged about 7.4 targets per game, just over 4 receptions per game. Those 3 total TDs, and if you had him on your fantasy team, you probably wanted a little bit more production because he was giving you 7.1 in all those PPR leagues. We mentioned the man, now we bring him in, our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. And JJ, we're waking up here on a Wednesday morning with this news. Is this a surprise to you at all?
Not a surprise at all that George Pickens is no longer going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. They had made that very clear around the NFL, certainly after trading for DK Metcalf a couple of months ago. And then when we got to the NFL draft, whether it happened on draft weekend or after draft weekend, it was clear that George Pickens was on his way out of Pittsburgh. Not really that big of a surprise if it's Dallas that he winds up with, obviously. We know that Jerry Jones had said they were working on something. We know the Dallas Cowboys during the draft did not take a wide receiver in any of the 7 rounds. And, of course, they are the Cowboys who sometimes will give up a decent amount of draft compensation in order to get a guy that they really want. Remember, they traded a 5th-round pick for Joe Milton, the quarterback. They traded last year a 4th-round pick for Jonathan Mingo with the Carolina Panthers, a former 2nd-round pick. And so if there is a surprise in this, Zach, it is giving up a 3rd-round pick in compensation for George Pickens. Look, there is no question at all that he has immense talent, and that to get someone who is capable of 1,000 yards receiving like he did in 2023 before missing a couple games this past year, the first of his career, and getting just below that threshold. Look, you would always send a 3rd-round pick for that player. But that person, what we have seen in 3 years in Pittsburgh, issues always surrounding accountability and maturity. And so now what you are only guaranteed if you are the Dallas Cowboys is 1 year of George Pickens. There's not that 5th-year option that would be available if you cannot agree to terms on a long-term contract at the conclusion of his rookie deal. The only sort of mechanism you have is the franchise tag. I don't know that that's a place that the Dallas Cowboys ever want to go with this player. And so, look, again, they are getting more than a 3rd-round talent in the player George Pickens, but still a risky proposition for the Cowboys in acquiring the person and everything that comes with George Pickens.
Yeah, so with that, what do you maybe view as a success if we go a year from now and, okay, they give up a 3rd-round pick, they get George Pickens? Is it to hope that he can fall in line, I'll call it, and they then sign him to a new contract? Or what do you think the thinking in Dallas might be?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. You know, I think that Jerry Jones and everyone in Dallas says, okay, we're going to put the star on the side of your helmet, and you will understand everything that means. You're going to be opposite CeeDee Lamb. You're going to be fed the ball plenty by Dak Prescott in Brian Schottenheimer's scheme. There's no question at all that if we can go out there and be successful, that you should have no issues with both winning and getting the football. So everyone there should be happy. I just don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case. Look, this is one of the best deep ball catchers in all of the NFL in George Pickens, a guy who knows how to contort his body for any sort of 50-50 or less than ball to go up and get. And so Dak Prescott, the quarterback, absolutely loves the player that he is getting. But look, I don't think that there are any tiers in Pittsburgh right now within that building that George Pickens is no longer there. It took a lot of resources, a lot of energy, a lot of patience that was drained over these past 3 seasons, sort of like dealing with him. And so, again, things can turn around. Players have turned things around before. Obviously, George Pickens has a large support group around him that certainly wants to see him succeed, get that big 2nd contract, and certainly with the talent that he has, he should be able to do that. And so Dallas, again, taking a slight risk here, let's not make any mistake about it, in pursuit of getting that other wide receiver that they have been looking for, in pursuit of getting back to that NFC championship game that has eluded them for going on 3 decades now.
Yeah, even week 13, we had Mike Tomlin say after the Bengals win, he's just got to grow up, man, talking about George Pickens. So that is who Dallas is getting to bring into their wide receiver room. I want to look at the Steelers and how you think and feel about them now. What does this mean for them after getting out under Pickens?
Yeah, so we just talked about how Dallas didn't go out and get a wide receiver in the draft. Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers did not draft a wide receiver either. Of course, they did use draft pick compensation in order to obtain DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks and paid him that contract extension. So they like what they have there. Of course, they still have Pat Freiermuth at tight end. They're going to be able to use him. Darnell Washington getting another year in that system. They like what they have at running back. Of course, the big question is who is going to be throwing them the football. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have already gotten into that next phase of off-season training activities where coaches can be on the field with players. They can kind of throw against air. You would love it if you were a coach of the Steelers, probably if you are an executive of the Steelers, to have your week 1 quarterback on the field right now being a part of this sort of OTAs. And look, if you believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the Steelers, I still believe that that is the case. You wonder, when is he coming in here? Now would be a great time. Yesterday would have been a better time. Tomorrow is an acceptable time for Aaron Rodgers to come in and be the quarterback of the Steelers. And so that obviously is the next step. And look, GM Omar Khan, he is always about making a deal. And so I don't think that this now means that the Steelers feel absolutely great about their weapons and they're not going to add at all between now and week 1. They certainly could. But as it stands right now, that they are able to get a 3rd-round pick for George Pickens, a player they knew was not going to be on their roster in 2025. They already have their guy in DK Metcalf after a year of trying to get that guy, go back to Brandon Ayuk, and that whole dalliance. They feel good enough. Now it's just about getting the quarterback in the system. We'll see when that is for Aaron Rodgers.
Do you think this move in any way could sway Aaron Rodgers one way or another by sending George Pickens out, or if whatever Aaron wants to do, he's going to do regardless of what happened here with this trade?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think that you answered it there, that it's the latter. Yeah. I don't think that Aaron Rodgers, he certainly wouldn't admit it, right? If this actually does sway him, he wouldn't say so. We've already heard him say what is the holdup for him. We've heard him talk about that. And so whatever sort of personal issues he and those around him are going through and working through, hopefully those get resolved to a very satisfactory end, and he's able at that point to be able to sign with the Steelers. Again, Steelers will wait. They're not going to wait forever, but in talking with folks, you sort of get the sense that they do believe that Aaron Rodgers will join them at some point. Of course, they just want it sooner rather than later. I don't think that George Pickens on a one-way ticket out of Pittsburgh heading now to Dallas, that is going to impact Aaron Rodgers. I do believe that these two things are independent of one another.
I know I asked the question, but it's like here we are talking about a George Pickens trade, and we ended up talking in the end about Aaron Rodgers. So the circle always finds a way to get right back to that same old point. Jonathan Jones, thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for all the breaking news all the time. And, of course, all the time with more football can be spent with Pushing the Pile. Kyle Long and Mike Renner giving you that skinny, the 411 on everything out there on the gridiron. Make sure you like them, subscribe, follow, tap in, watch, all those good things.